Thank you for continuing to join us as we all go through this time of social distancing together. We'd like to thank our actors for volunteering their time and talents for us from the safety of their own homes. And we'd like to send a special thank you to your friendly neighborhood Shakespeare for hosting us on his Facebook page. He'll be joining us on this virtual stage in just a few weeks as the story progresses. In the meantime, check out his upcoming production with the social distancing players, Julius Caesar, Beware the Ides of the March of the Penguins. We will post more links in the comments section here for more information. For more information about us and who we are and what we do, please feel free to check out zenithplayers.com. If you would like to read with us for future projects, send us an email at casting@zenithplayers.com, or even just send us a Facebook message and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. We are currently doing a new Shakespeare script every Saturday evening. We are happy to announce that this upcoming Saturday is The Tempest. We are also going to have a special reading on Thursday evening of The Maltese Falcon, so we hope you join us for that as well. We want to continue expressing our appreciation and thanks to the frontline and essential workers who are helping to keep all of us safe right now. We hope we can offer some distraction and entertainment for a few hours each week. Now I will hand you over to our very own Dr. Watson.
Chapter 5, 3 Broken Threads. Sherlock Holmes had, in a very remarkable degree, the power of detaching his mind at will. For 2 hours, the strange business in which we had been involved appeared to be forgotten, and he was entirely absorbed in the pictures of the modern Belgian masters. He would talk of nothing but art, of which he had the crudest ideas, from our leaving the gallery until we found ourselves at the Northumberland.
Henry Baskerville is upstairs expecting you. He asked me to show you up at once when you came.
Have you any objection to my looking at your register?
Not in the least.
The book showed that 2 names had been added after that of Baskerville. One was Theophilus Johnson and family of Newcastle. The other, Mrs. Oldmore, maid of High Lodge.
Surely that must be the same Johnson whom I used to know, a lawyer. Is he not grey-headed and walks with a limp?
No, sir. This is Mr. Johnson, the coal owner. A very active gentleman, not older than yourself.
Surely you are mistaken about his trade.
No, sir. He's used this hotel for many years, and he is very well known to us.
Ah, that settles it. Mrs. Oldmore, too, I seem to remember the name. Excuse my curiosity, but often calling upon one friend, one finds another.
Her husband was once mayor of Gloucester. She always comes to us when she is in town.
Thank you. I'm afraid I cannot claim her acquaintance. We have established a most important fact for these questions, Watson.
He continued in a low voice as we went upstairs together.
We know now that the people who are so interested in our friend have not settled down in this own hotel. That means that while they are, as we have seen, very anxious to watch him, they are equally anxious that he should not see them. Now, this is a most suggestive fact.
What does it suggest?
It suggests... hello, my dear fellow, what on earth is the matter?
As we came around the top of the stairs, we had run up against Sir Henry Baskerville himself. His face was flushed with anger, and he held an old and dusty boot in one of his hands. So furious was he that he was hardly articulate. When he did speak, it was in a much broader and more Western dialect than any which we had heard from him in the morning.
Seems to me they are playing me for a sucker in this hotel. They'll find they've started in to monkey with the wrong man unless they're careful. By thunder, if that chap can't find my missing boot, there will be trouble. I can take a joke with the best, Mr. Holmes, but they've gone a bit over the mark this time.
Still looking for your boot?
Yes, sir, and mean to find it.
But surely you said that it was a new brown boot.
So it was, sir, and now it's an old black one.
What? You don't mean to say that...
That's just what I do mean to say. I only had 3 pairs in the world, the new brown, the old black, and the patent leathers, which I am wearing. Last night, they took one of my brown ones, and today they've sneaked out one of the black. Well, have you got it? Speak out, man, and don't stand staring.
An agitated German waiter had appeared on the scene.
No, sir, I have made inquiry all over the hotel, but I can hear no word of it.
Well, either that boot comes back before sundown, or I'll see the manager and tell him that I go right straight out of this hotel.
It shall be found, sir. I promise you that if you will have a little patience, it will be found.
Mind it is, for it's the last thing of mine that I'll lose in this den of thieves. Well, Mr. Holmes, you'll excuse my troubling you about such a trifle.
I think it's well worth troubling about.
Why, you look very serious over it.
How do you explain it?
I just don't attempt to explain it. It seems the very maddest, strangest thing that's ever happened to me.
The strangest, perhaps?
What do you make of it yourself?
Well, I don't profess to understand it yet. This case of yours is very complex, Sir Henry. When taken in conjunction with your uncle's death, I am not sure that all of the 500 cases of capital importance which I have handled, there is one that cuts so deep. But we hold several threads in our hands, and the odds are that one or the other of them guides us to the truth. We may waste time in following the wrong one, but sooner or later we must come upon the right.
We had a pleasant luncheon in which little was said of the business which had brought us together. It was in the private sitting room to which we afterwards repaired that Holmes asked Baskerville what were his intentions.
To go to Baskerville Hall.
And when?
At the end of the week.
On the whole, I think that your decision is a wise one. I have ample evidence that you are being dogged in London, and amid the millions of this great city, it is difficult to discover who these people are or what their object can be. If their intentions are evil, they might do you a mischief, and we should be powerless to prevent it. You did not know, Dr. Mortimer, that you were followed this morning from my house.
Followed? By whom?
That, unfortunately, is what I cannot tell you. Have you among your neighbors or acquaintances on Dartmoor any man with a full black beard?
No. Let me see. Why, yes. Barrymore, Sir Charles Butler, is a man with a full black beard.
Where is Barrymore?
He is in charge of the hall.
We had best ascertain if he is really there, or if by any possibility he might be in London.
How can you do that?
Give me a telegraph form. Is all ready for Sir Henry. That will do. Address to Mr. Barrymore, Baskerville Hall. What is the nearest telegraph office? Grimpen. Very good. We will send a second wire to the postmaster, Grimpen. Telegram to Mr. Barrymore to be delivered into his own hand. If absent, please return wire to Sir Henry Baskerville, Northumberland Hotel. That should let us know before evening whether Barrymore is at his post in Devonshire or not.
That's so. By the way, Dr. Mortimer, who is this Barrymore, anyhow?
He is the son of the old caretaker, who is dead. They have looked after the hall for 4 generations now. So far as I know, he and his wife are a respectable couple as any in the country.
At the same time, it's clear enough that so long as there are none of the family at the hall, these people have a mighty fine home and nothing to do.
That is true.
Did Barrymore profit at all by Sir Charles' will?
He and his wife had £500 each.
Did they know that they would receive this?
Yes, Sir Charles was very fond of talking about the provisions of his will.
That is very interesting.
I hope that you do not look with suspicious eyes upon everyone who received a legacy from Sir Charles, for I also had £1,000 left to me.
Indeed. And anyone else?
There are many insignificant sums to individuals and a large number of public charities. The residue all went to Sir Henry.
And how much was the residue?
£740,000.
I had no idea that so gigantic a sum was involved.
Sir Charles had the reputation of being rich, but we did not know how very rich until we came to examine his securities. The total value of the estate was close on to £1 million.
Dear me, it is a stake for which a man might well play a desperate game. And one more question, Dr. Mortimer. Supposing that anything happened to our young friend here, you will forgive the unpleasant hypothesis, who would inherit the estate?
Since Roger Baskerville, Sir Charles' younger brother, died unmarried, the estate would descend to the Desmonds, who are distant cousins. James Desmond is an elderly clergyman in Westmoreland.
Thank you. These details are all of great interest. Have you met Mr. James Desmond?
Yes, he came down once to visit Sir Charles. He is a man of venerable appearance and of saintly life. I remember that he refused to accept any settlement from Sir Charles, though he pressed it upon him.
And this man of simple tastes would be the heir to Sir Charles' thousands.
He would be the heir to the estate because that is entailed. He would also be the heir to the money unless it were willed otherwise by the present owner, who can, of course, do what he likes with it.
And have you made your will, Sir Henry?
No, Mr. Holmes, I have not. I've had no time, for it was only yesterday that I learned how matters stood. But in any case, I feel that the money should go with the title and the estate. That was my poor uncle's idea. How is the owner going to restore the glories of the Baskervilles if he has not money enough to keep up the property? House, land, and dollars must go together.
Quite so. Well, Sir Henry, I am of one mind with you as to the advisability of your going down to Devonshire without delay. There is only one provision which I must make. You certainly must not go alone.
Dr. Mortimer returns with me.
But Dr. Mortimer has his practice to attend to, and his house is miles away from yours. With all the goodwill in the world, he may be unable to help you. No, Sir Henry, you must take with you someone, a trusty man, who will be always by your side.
Is it possible that you could come yourself, Mr. Holmes?
If matters came to a crisis, I should endeavor to be present in person, but you can understand that with my extensive consulting practice and with the constant appeals which reach me from many quarters, it is impossible for me to be absent from London for an indefinite time. At the present instant, one of the most revered names in England is being besmirched by a blackmailer, and only I can stop a disastrous scandal. You will see how impossible it is for me to go to Dartmoor.
Whom would you recommend, then?
Holmes laid his hand upon my arm.
If my friend would undertake it, there is no man who is better worth having at your side when you are in a tight place. No one can say so more confidently than I.
The proposition took me completely by surprise, but by the time I had time to answer, Baskerville seized me by the hand and wrung it heartily.
Well, now, that is real kind of you, Dr. Watson. You see how it is with me, and you know just as much about the matter as I do. If you will come down to Baskerville Hall and see me through, I'll never forget it.
Promise of adventure had always been a fascination to me, and I was complimented by the words of Holmes and by the eagerness with which the baronet hailed me as a companion. I will come with pleasure. I do not know how I could employ my time better.
And you will report very carefully to me. When a crisis comes, as it will do, I will direct you how you shall act. I suppose that by Saturday all might be ready?
Would that suit Dr. Watson?
Perfectly.
Then on Saturday, unless you hear to the contrary, we shall meet at the 10:30 train from Paddington.
We had risen to depart when Baskerville gave a cry of triumph, and diving into one of the corners of the room, he drew a brown boot from under a cabinet.
My missing boot!
May all our difficulties vanish as easily.
Very simple thing. I searched this room carefully before lunch.
And so did I, every inch of it.
There was certainly no boot in it then.
In that case, the waiter must have placed it there while we were lunching.
The German was sent for, but professed to know nothing of the matter.
I know nothing of the matter.
Nor could any inquiry clear it up. Another item had been added to that constant and apparently purposeless series of small mysteries which had succeeded each other so rapidly. Setting aside the whole grim story of Sir Charles' death, we had a line of inexplicable incidents, all within the limits of 2 days, which included the receipt of the printed letter, the black-bearded spy in the cab, The loss of the new brown boot, the loss of the old black boot, and now the return of the new brown boot. Holmes sat in silence in the cab as we drove back to Baker Street. I knew from his drawn brows and keen face that his mind, like mine own, was busy in endeavoring to frame some scheme into which all these strange and apparently disconnected episodes could be fitted. All afternoon, late into the evening, he sat lost in tobacco and thought. Just before dinner, 2 telegrams were handed in. The first ran,
Have just heard that Barrymore is at the hall, Baskerville.
the second,
Visited 23 hotels as directed, but sorry to report unable to trace cut sheet of the times. Cartwright.
There go 2 of my threads, Watson. There is nothing more stimulating than a case where everything goes against you. We must cast round for another set.
we still have the cabman who drove the spy.
Exactly. I have wired to get his name and address from the official registry. I should not be surprised if this were an answer to my question.
The ring at the bell proved to be something even more satisfactory than an answer, however, for the door opened and a rough-looking fellow entered, who was evidently the man himself.
I got a message from the head office that a gent at this address I've been inquiring for number 2704. I've driven my cab this 7 years and never a word of complaint. I come here straight from the yard to ask you to your face what you had against me.
I have nothing in the world against you, my good man. On the contrary, I have half a sovereign for you if you will give me a clear answer to my question.
Well, I've had a good day and no mistake. What was it you wanted to ask, sir?
Well, first of all, your name and address, in case I want you again.
John Clayton, 3 Turpey Street, the Borough. My cab is out of Shipley's Yard near Waterloo Station.
Now, Clayton, tell me all about the fare who came and watched this house at 10 o'clock this morning and afterwards followed the 2 gentlemen down Regent Street.
Why, there's no good in me telling you things, for you seem to know as much as I do already. The truth is that the gentleman told me that he was a detective and that I was to say nothing about him to anyone.
My good fellow, this is a very serious business, and you may find yourself in a pretty bad position if you try to hide anything from me. You say that your fare told you that he was a detective.
Yes, he did.
When did he say this?
When he let me.
Did he say anything more?
He mentioned his name.
Holmes cast a swift glance of triumph at me.
Oh, he mentioned his name, did he? That was imprudent. What was the name that he mentioned?
His name was Mr. Sherlock Holmes.
Never have I seen my friend more completely taken back than by the cabman's reply. For an instant he sat in silent amazement. Then he burst into a hearty laugh.
A touch, Watson, an undeniable touch. I feel a foil as quick and supple as my own. So, his name was Sherlock Holmes, was it?
Yes, sir. That was the gentleman's name.
Excellent. Tell me where you picked him up and all that occurred.
He held me at 9:30 in Trafalgar Square. He said that he was a detective, and he offered me 2 shillings if I would do exactly what he wanted all day and ask no questions. I was glad enough to agree. First, we drove down to the Northumberland Hotel and waited there until 2 gentlemen came out and took a cab from the rank. We followed their cab until it pulled up somewhere near here.
This very door.
I couldn't be sure of that, but I dare say my fare knew all about it. We pulled up halfway down the street and waited an hour and a half. Then the 2 gentlemen passed us, walking, and we followed down Baker Street and along until...
I know.
Until we got 3/4 down Regent Street. Then my gentleman threw up the trap and cried that I should drive right to Waterloo Station as hard as I could. I whipped up the mare. We were there under the 10 minutes. Then he paid up his 2 guineas, like a good one, and away he went into the station. Only just as he was leaving, he turned around and he said, "It might interest you to know that you have been driving Mr. Sherlock Holmes. That's how I came to know the name.
I see. And you saw no more of him?
Not after he went into the station.
And how would you describe Mr. Sherlock Holmes?
Well, he wasn't altogether such an easy gentleman to describe. I put him at 40 years of age, and he was middle height, 2 or 3 inches shorter than you, sir. He was dressed like a toff, and he had a black beard, cut square at the end, and a pale face. I don't know as I could say more than that.
Color of his eyes?
No, can't say that.
Nothing more that you can remember?
No, sir, no.
Well then, here is your half sovereign. There's another one waiting for you if you can bring any more information. Good night.
Good night, sir, and thank you.
John Clayton departed chuckling, and Holmes turned to me with a shrug of his shoulders and a rueful smile.
Snap goes our third thread, and we end where we began. Cunning rascal, he knew our number, knew that Sir Henry Baskerville had consulted me, spotted who I was in Regent Street, conjectured that I had got the number of the cab and would lay my hands on the driver, and so sent back this audacious message. I tell you, Watson, this time we have got a foeman who is worthy of our steel. I've been checkmated in London. I can only wish you better luck in Devonshire, but I'm not easy in my mind about it.
About what?
About sending you. It's an ugly business, Watson. Ugly, dangerous business, and the more I see of it, the less I like. Yes, my dear fellow, you may laugh, but I give you my word that I shall be very glad to have you back safe and sound at Baker Street once more.
End of chapter 5. Chapter 6, Baskerville Hall. Sir Henry Baskerville and Dr. Mortimer were ready upon the appointed day, and we started, as arranged, for Devonshire. Mr. Sherlock Holmes drove with me to the station and gave me his last parting injunctions and advice.
I will not bias your mind by suggesting theories or suspicions, Watson. I wish you simply to report facts in the fullest possible manner to me, and you can leave me to do the theorizing.
What sort of facts?
Anything which may seem to have a bearing, however indirect, on the case, especially the relations between young Baskerville and his neighbours, or any fresh particulars concerning the death of Sir Charles. I've made some inquiries myself in the last few days, but the results have, I fear, been negative. One thing only appears to be certain, and that is that Mr. James Desmond, who is the next heir, is an elderly gentleman of a very amiable disposition, so that this persecution does not arise from him. I really think that we may eliminate him entirely from our calculations. There remain the people who will actually surround Sir Henry Baskerville upon us.
Would it not be well in the first place to get rid of this Barrymore couple?
By no means, you could not make a greater mistake. If they are innocent, it would be a cruel injustice. If they are guilty, we shall be giving up all chance of bringing it home to them. No. We will preserve them upon our list of suspects. Then, there's a groom at the Hall, if I remember right. There are 2 moorland farmers. There is our friend Dr. Mortimer, whom I believe to be entirely honest. And there is his wife, of whom we know nothing. There is this naturalist, Stapleton, and there is his sister, who is a young lady of attraction. There's Mr. Franklin of Laughter Hall, who is also an unknown factor. And there are 1 or 2 other neighbors. These are the folk who must be your very special study.
I will do my best.
You are armed, I suppose?
Yes, I thought that.
No, certainly. Keep your revolver near you night and day, and never relax your precautions.
Our friends had already secured a full and were waiting for us upon the platform.
News?
No, we have no news of any kind. I could swear to one thing, and that is that we have not been shadowed during the last 2 days. We have never gone out without keeping a sharp watch, and no one could have escaped our notice.
You have always kept together, I presume.
Except for yesterday afternoon. I usually give up 1 day to pure amusement when I come to town, so I spent it at the Museum of the College of Surgeons.
And I went to look at the folk in the park.
But we had no trouble of any kind.
It was imprudent all the same. I beg, Sir Henry, that you will not go about alone. Some great misfortune will befall you if you do. Did you get your other boot?
No, sir, it is gone forever.
Indeed. That is very interesting. Well, goodbye.
The train began to glide down the track.
Bear in mind, Sir Henry, one of the phrases in that old legend which Dr. Mortimer has read to us. Avoid the moor in those hours of darkness. The powers of evil are exalted.
I looked back at the platform when we had left it far behind and saw the tall, austere figure of Holmes standing motionless and gazing after us. The journey was a swift and pleasant one, and I spent it in making a more intimate acquaintance of my two companions and in playing with Dr. Mortimer's spaniel. In a very few hours, the brown earth had become rough, the brick had changed to granite, and red clouds grazed in well-hedged fields, where the lush grasses and more luxuriant vegetation spoke of a richer, if a delicate climate. Young Baskerville stared eagerly out of the window and cried aloud with delight as he recognized the familiar features of Devon scenery.
I've been over a good part of the world since I left it, Dr. Watson, but I have never seen a place compare with it.
I never saw a Devonshire man who did not swear by his county.
You were very young when you last saw Baskerville Hall, were you not?
I was a boy in my teens at the time of my father's death and had never seen the hall, for he lived in a little cottage on the south coast. Thence I went straight to a friend in America. I tell you, it is all new to me, as it is to Dr. Watson, and I'm as keen as possible to see the moor.
Are you? Well then, your wish is easily granted, for here is your first sight of the moor.
Over the green squares of the fields and the low curve of a wood, there rose in the distance a grey, melancholy hill, with a strange jagged summit, dim and vague in the distance, like some fantastic landscape in a dream. Baskerville sat for a long time, his eyes fixed upon it, and I read upon his eager face how much it meant to him, this first sight of the strange spot where the men of his blood had held sway so long and left their mark so deep. There he sat, with his tweed suit and his American accent, in the corner of a prosaic railway carriage, and yet, as I looked at his dark and expressive face, I felt more than ever how true a descendant he was of that long line of high-blooded, fiery, and masterful men. There were pride, valor, and strength in his thick brows, his sensitive nostrils, and his large hazel eyes. If on that forbidding moor a difficult and dangerous quest should lie before us, this was at least a comrade for whom one might venture to take a risk, with the certainty that he would bravely share it. The train pulled up at a small wayside station, and we all descended. Outside, below the low white fence, the wagon was waiting. Our coming was evidently a great event. The station master and porters clustered round us to carry out our luggage. It was a sweet, simple country spot, but I was surprised to observe that by the gate there stood two soldierly men in dark uniforms, who leaned upon their short rifles and glanced keenly at us as we passed. The coachman, a hard-faced, gnarled little fellow, saluted Sir Henry Baskerville, and in a few minutes we were flying swiftly down the broad white road. Rolling pastures, lands curved upward on either side of us, and our old gabled houses peeped out from amid the thick green foliage. But behind the peaceful and sunlit countryside, there rose ever, dark against the evening sky, the long, gloomy curve of the moor, broken by the jagged and sinister hills. The wagon swung round into a side road, and we curved upward through deep lanes worn by centuries of fields, high banks on either side, heavy with dripping moss and fleshy, hard-tongued ferns. Bronzing bracken and mottled bramble gleamed in the light of the sinking sun. Still steadily rising, we passed over a narrow granite bridge and skirted a noisy stream which gushed swiftly down, foaming and roaring amid the grey boulders. Both road and stream wound up through a dense valley with scrub oak and fir. At every turn, Baskerville gave an exclamation of delight, looking eagerly about him and asking countless questions. To his eyes, all seemed beautiful. But to me, a tinge of melancholy lay upon the countryside, which bore so clearly the mark of the waning year. Yellow leaves carpeted the lane and fluttered down upon us as we passed. The rattle of our wheels died away as we drove through drifts of rotting vegetation. Sad gifts, as it seemed to me, for nature to throw before the carriage of the returning heir of the Baskervilles.
Hello, what is this?
A steep curve of heath-clad land, an outlying spur of the moor, lay in front of us. On the summit, hard and clear like an equestrian statue upon its pedestal, was a mounted soldier, dark and stern, his rifle poised ready over his forearm. He was watching the road along which we traveled.
What is this, Perkins?
Our driver half turned in his seat.
There's a convict escaped from Princetown, sir. He's been out 3 days now, and the warders watch every road and every station, but they've no sight of him yet. The farmers about here don't like it, sir, and that's a fact.
Well, I understand that they get £5 if they can give information.
Yes, sir, but the chance of £5 is but a poor thing compared to the chance of having your throat cut. You see, it isn't like any ordinary convict. This is a man that would stick at nothing.
Who is he, then?
It is Selden, the Notting Hill murderer.
I remembered the case well, for it was one in which Holmes had taken an interest on account of the peculiar ferocity of the crime and the wanton brutality which had marked all the actions of the assassin. The commutation of his death sentence had been due to some doubts as to his complete sanity, so atrocious was his conduct. A wagon had topped a rise, and in front of us rose a huge expanse of the moor, mottled with gnarls and craggy cairns and tors. The cold wind swept down from it and set us shivering. Somewhere there, on that desolate plain, was lurking this fiendish man, hiding in a burrow like a wild beast, his heart full of malignancy against the whole race which had cast him out. It needed but this to complete the grim suggestiveness of the barren waste, the chilling wind and the darkling sky. Even Baskerville fell silent and pulled his overcoat more closely around him. We left the fertile country behind and beneath us. We looked back on it now, the slanting rays of a low sun turning the streams to threads of gold and glowing on the red earth, new turned by the plough and the broad tangle of the woodlands. The road in front of us grew bleaker and wilder over huge russet and olive slopes, sprinkled with giant boulders. Now and then we passed a moorland cottage, walled and roofed with stone, with no creeper to break its harsh outline. Suddenly, we looked down into a cup-like depression, patched with stunted oaks and firs which had been twisted and bent by the fury of years of storm. Two high, narrow towers rose over the trees. The driver pointed with his whip.
Baskerville Hall.
Its master had risen and was staring with flushed cheeks and shining eyes. A few minutes later, we had reached the gates, a maze of fantastic tracery in wrought iron, with weather-bitten pillars on either side, blotched with lichens and surmounted by the boars' heads of the Baskervilles. The lodge was a ruin of black granite and bared ribs of rafters, but facing it was a new building, half constructed, the first fruit of Sir Charles' South African gold. Through the gateway, we passed into the avenue, where the wheels were again hushed amid the leaves, and the old trees shot their branches in a somber tunnel over our heads. Baskerville shuddered as he looked up the long, dark drive to where the house glimmered like a ghost at the farther end.
Was it here?
No. The U alley is on the other side.
It's no wonder my uncle felt as if trouble were coming on him in such a place as this. It's enough to scare any man. I'll have a row of electric lamps up here inside of 6 months.
The avenue opened into a broad expanse of turf, and the house lay before us. In the fading light, I could see that the center was a heavy block of building from which a porch projected. The whole front was draped in ivy, with patch clipped bare here and there where a window or coat of arms broke through the dark veil. From this central block rose the twin towers, ancient, crenellated, and pierced with many loopholes. To the right and left of the turrets were more modern wings of black granite. A dull light shone through heavy mullioned windows, and from the high chimneys which rose from the steep, high-angled roof, there sprang a single black column of smoke.
Barrymore, I presume?
A tall man had stepped from the shadow of the porch to open the door of the wagon. The figure of a woman was silhouetted against the yellow light of the hall. She came out and helped the man to hand down our bags.
You don't mind my driving straight home, Sir Henry? My wife is expecting me.
Surely you will stay and have some dinner.
No, I must go. I shall probably find some work awaiting me. I would stay to show you over the house, but Barrymore will be a better guide than I. Goodbye, and never hesitate, night or day, to send for me if I can be of service.
The wheels died away down the drive, while Sir Henry and I turned into the hall, and the door clanged heavily behind us. It was a fine apartment in which we found ourselves, large, lofty, and heavily raftered with huge bolts of age-blackened oak. In the great old-fashioned fireplace behind the high iron, dogs of log fire crackled and snapped. Sir Henry and I held out our hands to it, for we were numb from our long drive. Then we gazed round us at the high, thin window of old stained glass, the oak paneling, the stag's heads, the coats of arms upon the walls, all dim and somber in the subdued light of the central lamp.
It's just as I imagined it. Is it not the very picture of an old family home? To think that this should be the same hall in which for 500 years my people have lived. It strikes me solemn to think of it.
I saw his dark face lit up with a boyish enthusiasm as he gazed about him. The light beat upon him where he stood, but long shadows trailed down the walls and hung like a black canopy above him. Barrymore had returned from taking our luggage to our rooms. He stood in front of us now with a subdued manner of a well-trained servant. He was a remarkable-looking man, tall, handsome, with a square black beard and pale, distinguished features.
Would you wish dinner to be served at once, sir?
Is it ready?
In a very few minutes, sir. You will find hot water in your rooms. My wife and I will be happy, Sir Henry, to stay with you until you have made your fresh arrangements. But you will understand that under the new conditions, this house will require a considerable staff.
What new conditions?
I only meant, sir, that Sir Charles led a very retired life, and we were able to look after his wants. You would, naturally, wish to have more company, and so you will lead changes in your household.
Do you mean that your wife and you wish to leave?
Only when it is quite convenient to you, sir.
Oh, but your family have been with us for several generations, have they not? I should be sorry to begin my life here by breaking an old family connection.
I feel that also, sir, and so does my wife. But to tell the truth, sir, we are both very much attached to Sir Charles, and his death gave us a shock and made the surroundings very painful to us. I fear that we shall never again be easy in our minds at Baskerville Hall.
But what do you intend to do?
I have no doubt, sir, that we shall succeed in establishing ourselves in some business. Sir Charles's generosity has given us the means to do so. And now, sir, perhaps I had best show you to your rooms.
A square balustraded gallery ran round the top of the old hall, approached by a double stair. From this central point, 2 long corridors extended the whole length of the building, from which all the bedrooms opened. My own was in the same wing as Baskerville's, and almost next door to it. These rooms appeared to be much more modern than the central part of the house. The bright paper and numerous candles did something to remove the somber impression which our arrival had left upon my mind. But the dining room, which opened out of the hall, was a place of shadow and gloom. It was a long chamber with a step separating the dais where the family sat from the lower portion reserved for their dependents. At one end, the minstrel's gallery overlooked it. Black beams shot across above our heads, with a smoke-darkened ceiling beyond them. With rows of flaring torches to light it up, and the color and rude hilarity of an old-time banquet, it might have softened. But now, when 2 black-clothed gentlemen sat in a little circle of light thrown by a shaded lamp, one's voice became hushed and one's spirit subdued. A dim line of ancestors, in every variety of dress, from the Elizabethan knight to the buck of the Regency, stared down upon us and daunted us by their silent company. We talked little, and I, for one, was glad when the meal was over and we were able to retire into the modern billiard room and smoke a cigarette.
My word, it isn't a very cheerful place. I suppose one can tone down to it, but I feel a bit out of the picture at present. I don't wonder that my uncle got a little jumpy if he lived here all alone in such a house as this. However, if it suits you, we will retire early tonight, and perhaps things may seem more cheerful in the morning.
I drew aside my curtains before I went to bed and looked out from my window. It opened upon the grassy space which lay in front of the hall door. Beyond, 2 groups of trees moaned and swung in a rising wind. Half-moon broke through the rifts of the racing clouds. In its cold light, I saw beyond the trees a broken fringe of rocks, the long, low curve of the melancholy moor. I closed the curtain, feeling that my last impression was in keeping with the rest. And yet, it was not quite the last. I found myself weary and yet wakeful, tossing relentlessly from side to side, seeking for the sleep which would not come. Far away, a climbing clock struck out the quarters of the hours, but otherwise a deathly silence lay upon the old house. And then suddenly, in the very dead of night, there came a sound to my ears, clear, resonant, and unmistakable. It was the sob of a woman, muffled, strangling gasp of one who was torn by an uncontrollable sorrow. I sat up in bed and listened intently. The noise could not have been far away, and it was certainly in the house. For half an hour, I waited with every nerve on the alert. But there came no other sound, save the chiming clock and the rustle of the ivy on the wall.
Please visit zenithplayers.com. And once again, feel free to check out that very attractive donations page. If you want more information on our totally volunteer organization, including how to be involved in a reading like this one, you can go to our Facebook page, Zenith Players, or send an email to casting@zenithplayers.com, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. We want to continue to express our support to all of those out there who are fighting to keep us all safe so that we're able to continue doing this. We appreciate everything you do. Join us Thursday evening for the Maltese Falcon, and please join us Saturday evening for the Tempest. Thank you and good night.